What's up everyone? We are a few days into the patch 2.0 PTR, and I've been working on evolving our familiar leveling build into something viable for endgame in Season 6. What we've ended up with has honestly surprised me and turned out to be an extremely fun and powerful build. The goal here was to use all the new sorcerer tools that come with the Vessel of Hatred and make them as powerful as possible. So not just the familiar, but also the new aspect of Elemental Constellation and the new key passive, Enlightenment. Now, while the build began focused completely around familiar, it has evolved and now brings all our conjurations together to amplify this new aspect of Elemental Constellation. The core idea behind the build is to try to scale the damage of these elemental daggers as high as possible to get massive single target numbers. And we are doing that through our familiars and army of conjurations. The way this new aspect works is that when you cast any type of elemental spell, it conjures a dagger above your head for 3 seconds. Now, any additional spell you cast of that same element during the 3 seconds will increase the damage of that dagger by 100%. So the more spells of a similar type we can cast in 3 seconds, the higher the damage of that dagger. Additionally, all 3 elemental daggers charge and shoot independently, so we can spawn and build them up at the same time if we are casting different elements together. Now, this is where the beautiful synergy from familiar comes in. It actually counts as all 3 elements when cast. And so if we pump our 3 familiar charges into our daggers, we can scale the damage of all 3 daggers by 300% very quickly. And because each spell cast within the window increases the damage, the more spells we can cast in the 3 seconds, the more elemental punch each dagger will have. For this reason, we are maxing out attack speed, which we are using both to spam our cooldowns, but also to power cast one of the fastest and smoothest spell animations we have, Hydra. Oh, beautiful Hydra. And what this lets us do is constantly and continuously ramp the damage of the Flame Dagger. And when we weave this with multiple familiar casts, those familiars will spawn as fire, which increases all of our fire damage by 10% and inflicts burning to activate Devouring Blaze, making that Flame Dagger punch even harder. The Hydras themselves also inflict burning, and every Hydra cast also summons a circular proc of the Divine Barrage from Tyrael's Might. In addition to all of this, each of these super fast Hydra casts has a chance to shoot a Frozen Orb, which is what we are running as our first enchantment. Frozen Orb has insane synergy with conjurations through Fractured Winterglass, which we will talk about in a minute. Now, because we are continuously weaving our Hydra spell with our other cooldowns, it will give us the alternating elemental casts we need to constantly proc our new Enlightenment key passive without even having to think about it. This is extremely powerful, as once procced, it gives us an additional 25% damage multiplier, 45% mana regeneration, and 20% attack speed. It also grants us the non-physical damage of all of our elements combined when it's active, which will be very often in this build. To give us another 25% attack speed above the first cap, we are running Prime Unstable Currents and pairing that with Aspect of the Orange Herald, which synergizes perfectly with our Lucky Hit setup. When fighting big groups of mobs, this will give us 100% uptime on our ultimate. With the speed we are attacking and the amount of conjurations we have, we are getting a ton of chances at Lucky Hit, which is why we are pairing this build with Andariel's Visage to give us constant AoE poison explosions. We're also supplementing our AoE damage with the most powerful sorcerer aspect in the game right now, Splintering Energy. This will make any Lightning Spear crit proc additional lightning damage that arcs between enemies, and this is a very powerful flat skill damage that infinitely scales with our crit damage. Now, since we're not running Ice Blades on our bar, and we're not actually casting any Frozen Orbs to get Ice Blades from our Fractured Winterglass, we are running Ice Blades as our second enchantment slot. I tried a bunch of different stuff here, including Familiar and Firebolt, but nothing feels as good or makes as much sense as Ice Blades simply because of how many cooldowns we are constantly mashing, especially with Familiar counting as a multiple charge cooldown to feed into this. We can get to our 6 Ice Blades cap without having it on our bar. This feeds into the cooldown reduction loop for all of our conjurations, which will be empowered by Winterglass, but also into our teleport and flame shield to give us consistent mobility and reliable defensives. Speaking of defensives, once you get properly geared up, this build is surprisingly tanky. Because we are hitting so much with our conjurations, Frozen Orbs, and Tyraels, we are getting a ton of constant life on hit back from Andariel's. Additionally, we're getting tons of barrier generation from mashing our cooldowns with the protection passive. This makes it so most of the time, we can stand right in the middle of the fray and just let it rip. This is important because it seems like our daggers seek the nearest enemy, so you can kind of use your positioning as target selection for your elemental dagger machine gun. There is nothing limiting this build's range though, so you can definitely stay back and blast when you need to. The main reason I die in this build is standing in ground explosions like a true professional. Now, because our elemental daggers are big single target damage, this build especially excels at taking down bosses. Not only are we tanky enough to basically just stand there and soak everything except the echoes, but we also have the aggressive burst to absolutely roast all the tormented bosses and make bosses in the pit much less annoying. If you like big numbers, you'll really enjoy this build because alongside your millions of damage coming from spears, you'll get daggers hitting for around 50 million, with bigger ones already coming close to cresting 100 million damage with a single dagger. Now getting into the really cool new addition of the Runewords, I found two really solid rune combos that feel great for this build, and I'm sure there are going to be other options for this, so if you guys end up trying anything else with this or anything cool in general, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. But I've been running Yule paired with Ohm, so the Yule Ohm Runeword, which makes it so every 10 cooldowns we press, we get a free Barbarian's Warcry, which gives us additional damage multiplier and move speed, and when we are consistently mobbing this, we'll have 100% uptime. Second, we are running Bach paired with Mott, so the Bach Mott Runeword, and this makes it so every 15 meters we travel, we get a stack of Rogue's Dark Shroud, which gives us 6% damage reduction, stacking up to 6 times. What's great about this one is it just automatically generates as we move around, and there's no timer on the stacks, so once we start moving around a little bit, we will always be carrying an extra 36% damage reduction into battle, and will automatically regenerate it while clearing forward or kiting around. Alright, now let's talk about Fractured Winterglass and the power of this build. Fractured Winterglass is the most powerful sorcerer item in the game, and the synergy it has with Frozen Orb and any conjuration spell is on another level. A maxed out Winterglass with 30 conjuration stacks delivers a 330% damage multiplier, 330% move speed, which will cap your crit chance with Esus, and 660% additional mana regen. What? Every conjuration has a lucky hit chance to launch a frozen orb, and every frozen orb explosion lowers the cooldown of all your conjurations. So when we run Aspect of Frozen Orbit with this, every orb explodes 3 times, all of which count toward the cooldown reduction. So here we have an extremely powerful feedback loop where the more conjurations we create, the more frozen orbs they shoot, which then explode multiple times and continuously reduce the cooldown on those same conjurations, which can then be casted again to create more frozen orbs. This is what lets you spool up to 30 or more conjurations at once, and 30 is the new cap on the Conjuration Mastery passive. Now, a good Winterglass with a GA on Conjuration Mastery or cooldown reduction is what's really going to unlock the full potential of this build. For some reason, along with all the cheat codes, you cannot get an 800 unique in PTR, but I was finally able to get an 800 Winterglass after a bunch of Zir kills, thanks to my new homie Malenko, who passed me one of theirs when it dropped, which was definitely better than what I was working with, but it's still a ways off from what a great Winterglass looks like. So with an average Winterglass, a few other level 600 uniques, and missing about 80 Paragon points, this build is currently clearing tier 90s in the pit very comfortably, and we're right at pit tier 98 right now. We can handle it fine still, we're just running out of time. A Fractured Winterglass with a GA on Conjuration Mastery to max out our damage multiplier, or GA on cooldown reduction to keep us at 30 conjurations, would definitely let this build crest tier 100. And remember guys, this is with the numbers crunch and rework pit levels, so 100 is getting pretty beefy. With better gear and a lot more Paragon points to go, there's definitely going to be room for this build to grow in Season 6. The way to play this build at its simplest is pretty easy. Hold Hydra and mash your cooldowns. However, if you're looking to maximize your DPS and push high in the pit, it can definitely be played a bit more tactically than that. The main thing you always want to keep in mind is that everything you are casting is constantly feeding into your daggers. The visual and animations they added on these are actually really cool, and with the Shadow Rune stacks and Holy Daggers flying around, we definitely have some Elemental Rogue vibes going. But basically, as soon as you see one of these daggers form, in 3 seconds it will shoot out at a nearby enemy. Every spell you cast of a magic element while it's forming like this increases its damage by 100%. Your Frost and Lightning daggers will sort of ramp up automatically. The main one to pay attention to is your Fire dagger. When you have everything spooled up, you can try to feed as many Hydras as possible into the 3-second window to get a giant Flame dagger. The best way to do this is when you see a Flame dagger form over your head, follow your next Hydra cast with 3 super fast familiars, dumping all 3 of your familiar charges. All of those will spawn as fire, increase your fire damage, and activate Devouring Blaze. Then hold Hydra down until the dagger launches, basically trying to get as many fire casts into the 3-second window as possible. It also seems like the daggers prefer nearby targets, so if there's something you want to kill quickly like a pink guy or elite, it can help to position right next to them to blast all your daggers point blank. The only other thing you want to really cast in this window is Lightning Spear, and this is going to be your most important spell for overall DPS. The more you can cast Lightning Spear, the faster you will clear. While Ice Blades, Familiar, and Hydra all have caps on the quantity you can have summoned, you can have an infinite amount of lightning spears up. With a better Winterglass, we will be able to spool up our CDR enough on Lightning Spear to consistently cap us at 30 Conjuration Mastery stacks. So basically, holding Hydra and pressing Lightning Spear on cooldown are absolutely crucial to our DPS in this build. We also want to be consuming our familiar charges as quickly as they come up, which will be very fast from the Winterglass and Iceblade CDR combined. Each of the cooldown value of these casts, which are happening very rapidly, then feed into your Iceblade's enchantment to keep our Iceblades up, which gives us more CDR not only on these charges, but also on Teleport and Flame Shield, which are not getting CDR from the Winterglass. And to bring all this together, we have our ultimate, Unstable Currents, which again, we want to be pressing basically on cooldown. We're mainly running this for the extra 25% attack speed, which exists in the second attack speed bucket alongside Enlightenment, letting us get to 145% attack speed. However, you can actually get a lot of value out of the way it double casts lightning spells while casting lightning spears, some of which will in fact be more lightning spears. We're also trying to get additional lightning spears to spawn from our weapon tempers, and again, the more lightning spears we have up, the higher our DPS will ramp, not only from the splintering energy aspect proccing, but also from the extra Conjuration Mastery stacks amping the rest of our damage. If you want to max out your ult window once you're spooled up with a bunch of Conjurations out, try casting Unstable Currents, then spamming Lightning Spear and Familiar without casting Hydra for a couple seconds. This should keep your Familiar as lightning and count with Lightning Spear as a bunch of lightning casts back to back in order to proc additional lightning spells from Unstable Currents, some of which may be more lightning spears. This would also be a really cool way to scale your lightning dagger, and if you don't really see me doing this, it's because I just thought of it right now. If you are trying this, you'll want to do it when your Enlightenment is active, since you'll have the extra damage boost and the alternating spell types doesn't matter while it's active. Now defensively, we're going to use Teleport for mobility, unstoppable, or extra damage reduction, and then we're going to use Flame Shield to save ourselves. Bosses are super easy in this build because you can just stand there and dagger them. Once you're geared up, you can soak all the damage from their normal attacks just fine, and if you're patient with your Flame Shield and use it for the echoes, we have enough CDR with Ice Blades to where it's up most of the time when we need it. If it's not up, we can use Teleport to reposition and get some damage reduction. Your new Barbarian Warcry from your Runeword will activate automatically as you mash all your buttons, which gives you increased damage and move speed, and your Rogue Shadows will build automatically as you clear and kite around. That's about as much as I've figured out so far in the very short time I've had with this build, but it's fun enough to where it's definitely a build I'll be revisiting and looking to push a bit in Season 6. Alright homies, now let's take a quick look at our gear. Our gear is looking pretty goated just because we're in PTR. We can get a lot of this stuff for free. Except for our regular uniques, which for whatever reason you can open boxes for like 3 GA mythics, but you can't get a freaking 800 regular uniques. So my Tel Rashas and my Esus are like item level 600 still. They have good unique rolls, which is what I really need out of them, so it's not a huge deal, but we're missing a good little stat chunk on both of these. And then our Winterglass is probably our weakest piece. And we got this from our homie who hooked it up after we couldn't get one to drop. They were in there with us and they got this and passed it to us, which was awesome. But basically what we're looking for here is we want a GA on either Conjuration cooldowns are reduced when a Frozen Orb explodes, or Conjuration Mastery, or both. That would be insanely goated. But really in this build, those are the two GAs you're looking for. And the non-physical damage isn't bad because that triples up with the way Enlightenment works, but what we really need is the max amount of damage, of multiplicative damage happening from our Conjuration Mastery, which is only going to happen if we max out that passive from a GA'd Conjuration Mastery on this. And then we also need those Frozen Orb explosions, reducing our cooldowns as much as possible so we can get as many Lightning Spears out as possible, up to 30 Conjurations total, which we're reaching right now situationally if we have a lot of stuff we're killing, but getting this a better Winterglass would basically let you, in addition with the lucky hit, we're missing 12% on getting the Conjurations to actually spawn the Frozen Orb. So we'd have extra 12% lucky hit there, and then we'd have 2 more ranks on Conjuration Mastery, and then we would have, I think you can get the cooldown one almost to like a second if it's like GA'd and Mastered a couple times. But those are the 2 affixes we're really looking for on the Winterglass. That's certainly what's most important for this to make this build work, like overall as an item. So keep an eye out. And Winterglass, most powerful item for Sorcerer, going to be used for a ton of different builds just because of how insane Conjuration Mastery scales. 330% damage multiplier at rank 11. Conjuration Mastery, when you have 30 Conjurations out, is just You know, nothing else even comes close to that level of multiplier, right? Like Telrash was a big multiplier. It's only 75%. It's 330% we can get to with this. All right, so taking a look at our mythics real quick, we are rocking Endariel's Visage, Tyrael's Might, and Ring of Starless Skies as our mythic setup. And the way the world tiers work now, we are in Torment 4, and you can see when we're up here, we're getting negative 100% resistance, and we are getting negative 1,000 armor as well. So basically, you have to build to 2,000 armor and 100% more resistances to be able to get capped in World Tier 4. And you can see we're barely armor capped. But basically, if you're not running Shaco as your helmet, see how this has like a really big base armor roll on it? Since we're running Andariel's, we don't have that. So we have to figure out how to cover our armor gap somewhere else. And we are doing that through our pants, which we'll get to in just a second. But for our resistances, we're getting like almost all of them through our intelligence scaling, which is massive. So we're getting 50% here, and then we are getting 90% through Tyrael's Might. And so basically, for armor, you need Shaco, or you need to do something like we're doing on our legs to cover your armor gap. And then for your resistance gap, I think in Torment 4, honestly, you're going to like really need either Tyrael's Might or Spear of the Lycander. Like one or the other, because if you're not running either of those in it's somewhere in your build, you're missing out on 100% elemental resistance, which is basically this gap we have to jump to be here, right? So I think mythics are also going to be easier to get though, guys. So worry not. Hopefully it'll be fairly easy for all of us. Not easy, but reasonable for all of us to be able to, you know, farm these mythics and have pretty good looks on them. And so we have a pretty gangster Andariel's Visage. Real quick, let's talk about the armor. So go into our pants real quick. We're covering basically our entire armor gap that we're missing from Shaco here. And the way we were doing that is we're doing, we just re-rolled. See, we got good pants with GA int max life, exactly what we want. We re-rolled the third affix to armor. Got a decent roll in the window, like right in the middle pretty much. And then we did a temper for percent total armor. That one hit kind of low in the window. If that was higher, it would help a bit. But basically, from there, we either have to hit the armor itself and the total armor percentage once, or hit the armor twice, like I did here, when you're masterworking up, and then get it all the way to 12. And that, combined with just a little bit of armor to cover us in our Paragon, which we're not going out of the way to get, we're just kind of scooping out of convenience. We're getting a little bit of extra armor here, which we're pathing to this node anyways, and we're getting a little bit of extra armor here, pathing to this node, and that is getting increased by this 17.4% total armor increase. So are our skulls and all of that. The skulls, those little armor nodes, and these pants are what's bringing us right over, just barely over the 1,000 armor cap in Torment 4. So basically, if you're not running Shaco like a build like this, you're going to be looking for pants with an armor roll that you can do this with, and that's going to basically cover you. Okay, so let's look at our attack speed, which is capped at 100%, and we are doing that between two items. So basically, you want to try to get your attack speed to 100% between Andariel's and Starless, so you don't have to worry about it anywhere else. So you can see we have a GA attack speed on Andariel's masterworked once. That's giving us 66%. Then we have a regular attack speed on Starless masterworked twice. That's giving us 34%. That's putting us right over. We're 0.1% over the attack speed cap just between those two items, which is pretty gangster, to be honest. So you want to cover those first, like that's the most important thing to try to cover between these two items. And then from there, I think the second most important stat on your Andariel's Visage for like masterworking is going to be this life on hit. And you can see in the footage, we're getting a ton of self-healing from this life on hit. And life on hit as a stat is actually removed. Like if you look on all the jewelry and stuff now in this version, like in patch 2.0, you're not going to be able to find a life on hit roll. They're all like the lucky hit. See how it's like up to chance to heal life, lucky hit? It's not actual life on hit, and Dariel still has life on hit. And so we're really leveraging that to the max, getting so many hits out from all of our conjurations and stuff that we're going to have tons and tons of life on hit flowing through from Andariel's. And then obviously all stats not bad. The one you really don't care too much about is the max poison resist. And then looking at our Tyrael's Might, I think the most important stat here is going to be damage reduction. So if you can find a GA damage reduction and then Masterwork it a couple times. That would be the best. And then I think second would probably be this max resistance all elements, which is actually really cool. You can see it's bringing us up to almost 81% instead of 70% resistance, which is definitely can't be hurting our survivability. Definitely is probably helping us a bit, right? For our Ring of Starless, funnily enough, in this build, we don't care at all about this core skills roll, okay? So what we really care about is getting attack speed first, like we talked about, to 100%. And then from there, making sure our crit chance is getting to 100%. So our Starless can do a huge amount to cover our crit chance. You can see we're getting almost 30% from a GA crit chance roll, just masterworked once. We can look, our base is at 74% right now. When I dodge, which puts me at 100% movement speed, we're almost at 98%. So we are right there. We're super close to the crit cap. And when I pop a precision elixir for the extra crit damage, which gives me a little more than it says it does, because I think it's getting scaled by something. That's going to bring us to 100% crit chance, and when we're going to always be at 200% move speed from Conjuration Mastery. So the Conjuration Mastery is giving us 330% move speed when it's spooled up. So we're at 140% base, but when we're in combat, we're always going to be at 200 move speed. So that means our crit chance is always going to be here. So we're at 100% attack speed, 100% crit chance. We're looking at almost 3,850 critical strike damage. And this is going to be our most powerful additive attribute because we're like double dipping. At 100% crit chance, this number is benefiting literally everything. Because if you're critting 100% of the time, this has 100% uptime, this additive, this getting put in the additive bucket before it gets multiplied against all the other multipliers. And so just incredibly strong with the value the tempers are, like all the rolls are really high for critical strike damage, like larger than others, like vuln damage or all damage or whatever. And then on top of all that, so it's scaling the damage of everything, but then it's also scaling the damage of this aspect of splintering energy basically infinitely. And so this has this flat skill value damage that's then increased by your critical strike damage bonus with no cap. And so as we build critical strike damage, it's literally just, it's helping everything. It's helping all of our damage, and then it's power scaling this. So basically we're trying to prio every slot we have to scoop that we can. We're trying to get it. So you can see here, I tried to get some crit strike damage gloves. I got the temper on crit strike damage, and then I masterworked them till I hit both of them a couple times. And funnily enough, guys, the actual temper for critical strike damage is higher than an affix for critical strike damage. If you see this, like even if you took away all the masterworking, the base value of the critical strike damage temper is bigger than a GA critical strike damage base affix. And so the tempers for critical strike damage are huge. You really want to lock in that critical strike damage temper here and on your offhand and on your main hand. And I bricked a couple things trying to do that. So we have multiple swords here that we're working with. But real quick, these are basically our 3 items, like offensive slots that we are using that aren't mythics or uniques, okay? So this is like the big 3 aspects that are making this build work. We have Splintering Energy, which is the damage that arcs between the lightning spears. We have Frozen Orbit, which is what's feeding the CDR of our Winterglass, making all of our frozen orbs explode 3 times. And then we have Elemental Constellation, which is the thing charging the elemental daggers. So those are like the big 3 offensive aspects. The only other aspect we have is Honor Pants, which is the aspect of Orange Herald, and that through all the lucky hit happening from all our conjurations, we are getting a really good chunk of cooldown reduction to give us basically 100% uptime on our ult when we're all spooled up. And then, obviously I forgot to mention this, but we're getting a bunch of really nice, basically free poison explosions happening from Andariels all the time from our lucky hit stack and all our conjurations up. So for these 3 offensive aspect slots for tempers, we want critical strike damage on all 3 of them. And then for tempering, we honestly want to try to hit that critical strike damage as much as we can. And then a secondary on weapons, we want to get this chance for a second lightning spear to cast, because remember what we were talking about, where a huge chunk of our damage is coming from the amount of lightning spears we have out. We really want to get to 30 conjuration mastery stacks, and the only way we can do that is spooling up our lightning spears, because all our other conjurations have caps on the amount we can have out. And so we're basically prioritizing lightning spear a little bit on these different items. So we're trying to get as many lightning spears out as possible when we cast it, and we're giving it a little boosted lucky hit chance as well to launch more frozen orbs and feed into that CDR loop. Other than that, basically intelligence and max life is what you're looking like for on all these. So if I could, I would get intelligence GA and then max life, you know, GA as well, if I could, in the dream world, like something like this, for all 4 of these slots. I think that, and then for the third roll on offhand, you can do some different stuff. I have it on cooldown reduction right now, but I think with a good enough Winterglass, you actually won't need this CDR for the same reason I don't think going to end up running this skill. It's not working right now in PTR, so it's doing nothing, but I don't think we're even going to end up needing this with a good enough Winterglass. So you might even look to reroll this cool, like if I got a good enough Winterglass, I might look to reroll this cooldown reduction into something else, like critical strike damage would be good. I think you can still roll that on offhand. You definitely can on main hand. So you want critical strike damage as that 3rd affix on main hand, and then if you can get it as that 3rd affix on gloves, that is goated as well. You can also scoop crit chance on gloves like I have here to cover basically between Starless, your gloves, and Esus, you can get yourself to 100% crit cap, right? Those are aspects. You're looking for a sword here as well. It doesn't matter too much, like it's not a huge deal, but I really like sword just for the extra crit strike damage because we're really leaning into that stack, right? And then for Esus and Talrashas, you can see mine are pretty balls, but they're actually not, because all you really need out of these is that unique affix roll to be maxed out. So we need 25% here, and we need 40% here, or as close to it as we can get. And that's what's going to give us the most value from these items. Excuse me. And so Esu's Heirloom, if you could get a GA on something, you would want it on critical strike damage, and that's basically the main one you would also want to try to masterwork, because we're going to get enough move speed from Conjuration Mastery. We don't really need that move speed too bad. And the crit strike damage is going to be scaling everything, all our damage, like we just talked about, with 100% crit chance, and then coming over to Talrashas. Funnily enough, like again, the cooldown reduction, I don't think is going to be super important here in the end with a good enough Winterglass. So the main thing we want to focus on here is actually going to be non-physical damage. So if you could find a GA for non-physical damage, and the reason that is because with the way Enlightenment works, while enlightened, your bonus damage with fire, lightning, and cold are equal to them combined. So what does that mean? That means when Enlightenment's active, which is most of the time for us, our fire damage equals 780% plus 780% plus 780%. So we are almost at 2,400. If these were all 800, we'd be at 2,400 fire damage. Because of that, we have a really high value behind covering our main things like attack speed and crit. We're really trying to stack as much non-physical damage as we can, because we're basically triple dipping in that. Not only we're getting to access it 3 times in our additive bucket, because they're getting added together. And you can see, like if I take my Talrashas off, you know, it drops, it's giving that non-physical to all 3. So this non-physical is actually not 75%. It's actually 3 times that when we have Enlightenment up. So it'd be, what, like 225% additive instead of the 75. So if you can GA this and hit it a couple times with Masterworking, I think that's going to give you the most value to scale your damage with your Talrashas. And then secondary to that would just be scooping lucky hit chance, and I guess with the way resistances are working and trying to go, you know, max resistance cap with materials like the potent wording wouldn't be too bad as well, I guess. All right, I think that's it for gear, if I'm not missing anything. I don't know if you saw this. This is like from another season, isn't it? Oh, runes. So for our rune words, we talked about it in the section, but in one of them we're going Yule Ohm, which is every 10 cooldowns we cast, we get a war cry, and that's happening all the time because we're mashing so many buttons. And then in our head, we are getting Bach Ma, and that's going to let it, so just basically organically as we're moving around, we're gaining passive damage reduction from those shadows building up. And as the shadows stack, they don't have like a timer, so they just like stay up in between combat, so you can like build them up as you're running between packs, and that value like carries over into, you know, the next mob or group of mobs or whatever. Oh, and then with materials, we're also going to be getting we're going to be full life, like basically the whole time, because of all the healing we're getting from Andariels and all the barriers we're proccing from our protection passive. So you don't really have to worry about the Tyrael's Might thing. It's just going to be always doing the Divine Barrage pretty much in this build. And the Divine Barrage is like really good around Hydra. You'll notice when I cast Hydra, it's like that circle thing. So really trying to like focus your hydra spawning, your constant hydra spawning where you want max DPS seems to bring those spears in like centrally to that area. You know what I mean? All right, so we're looking at 334 strength, almost 2,500 intelligence, 582 will, and 811 dex, just over armor cap. This number matters nothing unless they changed it with the patch 2.0, but in live right now, this number is meaningless. You should completely ignore it. It will lead you astray. And then we're rocking almost 3,600 life. And if you don't get max life rolls on these pieces, like you see I have 2 big GA ones, like that's carrying all my health. Like look, that's almost 1,000 health here, almost 1,000 health here. I only have 3,600, right? So if I take one of those off, like, yeah, we're dropping 1,000, we're dropping another 1,000. So without those 2 rolls, I'm literally a third of the health at like 1,000 health, and I'm just getting one tapped by everything. Okay, so those health rolls actually end up being pretty important for the build, and the bigger that health pool, the bigger the 30% from protection is going to be, right? So every cooldown is going to give you a little higher value barrier, and then you're going to have like a bigger pool to survive all the damage as you're getting all this life on hit back from Andariel. So let's take a just super quick look at the stat window one more time. I'll just show you guys the full thing here. We already looked at the resistances, but 100% attack speed, 100% crit chance, almost 4,000 crit damage, 1,000 vuln, and so all these fire, lightning, and cold with enlightenment are tripled. So we're looking at what, like 2,340 for all 3 of these, pretty much, with enlightenment up, and then some big elite additive as well, just from Paragon. And then all our defensives, all this is just from our goated materials, this 49% here, but we're getting a bunch of damage reduction through our Paragon. And then we're pretty good lucky hit chance as well, boosted by almost 100%. So what that means, guys, like let's say you get a 100% lucky hit chance. That doesn't mean you're going to proc the effect 100% of the time. It's a little misleading. So like, let's take Lightning Spear, for example. See how this says lucky hit chance 10%? If I didn't have that 85% on, it would say something like 5%. Like if you just made a Sorcerer right now and checked out your Lightning Spear without any lucky hit, it's probably somewhere around 5 or 6%. So basically what that number is doing is that percentage is scaling the base lucky hit value already on that individual spell. So what, let's just pretend we're pretty close. Let's pretend this is a 100% lucky hit chance bonus, right? And let's pretend we had none on right now looking at our skills. If this was a base 10% lucky hit chance and I geared up with a 100% lucky hit bonus, that would take this lucky hit chance to 20% because it's increasing the percentage by 100%. So it would bring 10% to 20%. It would bring my Hydra from 5% to 10% lucky hit chance. It would bring my Familiar from 20% to 40% lucky hit chance. So it's already doing that right now, but that's basically like, you know, to give you kind of an idea in your head of what lucky hit means. 100% lucky hit chance does not mean effects are happening 100% of the time. It does mean you're doubling the chance you have at lucky hit effects happening. And that's going to be the actual chance itself, value of the chance itself is going to be dependent on the spell. Hope that makes sense. I have a whole video on lucky hit. I basically say that same thing though, but if you want to check that out, it might be a little deeper. All right, now let's hop over to skills real quick. All right, starting at the top, we just need 2 ranks here to get 2 core skills. We're not using a basic. I have 1 in each of these because I was messing around with them as enchantments. Then we have a maxed out Frozen Orb with 5 points going to Greater Frozen Orb. This is boosted by 3 just from our Ring of Starless Skies. Then we are coming down here. We're not getting Elemental Dominance because we're not casting Frozen Orb, so this is going to do nothing if we're not casting it. It's just shooting out as our enchantment. Doesn't count as a cast. So then we're coming down to defensives, getting 1 in Flame Shield without any upgrades, then going Teleport to Shimmering Teleport for the damage reduction and move speed, 3 in Glass Cannon, it hurts but we need it, then it's actually not too bad anymore, only 6%. 1 in Elemental Attunement for the chance to reset these with the amount of lucky hit we're getting. That's going to happen every 10 seconds, so we max out our value with 1 here. Then 1 in Energy Focus just to get to Dampen Barrier, or Dampen Layer, which is a new passive, and that's going to give us just a little bit extra damage reduction. Coming down to our Conjuration skills tree, which is kind of the star of the show here. So we got 1 in, first of all, maxed out Familiar, going to Invoked Familiar to give us 10% multiplicative of each familiar type as they're out. Then we have Hydra going for the burn. Then we have Ice Blades going for the cooldown reduction. Then we have a Lightning Spear going for the double cast and the stun. And then maxed out Conjuration Mastery, obviously. And with that GA necklace, I think you can get it to 8 is the max, if I'm not mistaken. So that would put this at 11. And that's going to get us to that at 30 stacks with 11% damage. We're going to get to 330% multiplicative. And that's what I've been talking about throughout the video. So that's the goal. 11 out of 3 Conjuration Mastery. And that's going to need a +8. On the Winterglass. So we have 3 in Lucky Hit to feed into all the Lucky Hit stuff we've been talking about. And then we have 1 in Align the Elements, similar to like Elemental Attunement, where you're going to get max value at a 1 point here. And we also need it to get to Protection, which we've talked about a lot. Every cooldown we're pressing is giving us free barrier from Protection. And then we're not using a ton of mana, but we are going to grab Mana Shield because we need all the damage reduction we can get. So this is going to be active a good chunk of the time because we are spam casting Hydra. So we're still going to have this up. We're still going to be churning through 100 mana pretty easily in 5 seconds, I think. And then coming down and grabbing Devouring Blaze, 3 out of 3 there to get that 30% crit multiplier. Then 1 in Permafrost, mainly to get to Hoarfrost. And we're grabbing this just because we have so many Frozen Orbs hitting. It's just like a little bit of extra free mana for when we don't have Conjuration Mastery all the way spooled up to 660% mana regen with Enlightenment, giving another 45%. So when those 2 things are on, we don't need this. But when they're not, it's like a little bit of protection. And I just noticed like running 1 point here makes a big difference in kind of how our overall mana feels. So you can play with that if you want. You can play with any of this if you want, obviously. And then snatching our ult, Unstable Currents with Prime Unstable Currents. We don't need this final upgrade because we're not getting any Crackling Energy. Then we're going 1 in Coursing Currents just to get to 3 in Electrocution to get, again, more damage reduction, which is going to be active basically all the time from our Lightning Spears critting everything. Then we're going 3 in Elemental Synergies for this extra little bit of multiplier. We're going to have good extra multiplicative here for our shock and pyromancy. So we'll have 9% for shock, and we'll have, I think this counts as all of them. So we'll have 12% for shock, and we'll have 9% for fire, which is pretty nice from that new passive. I like that a lot. Elemental synergies. And then this one's broken right now in PTR. It's just not doing anything. But I think with a good enough Winterglass, we're not going to need this. I think early on, you want to start here. So if you don't have good CDR yet, you want to pull a couple points from somewhere, probably Lucky Hit. I would pull, maybe try pulling this mana one and like 2 at a Lucky Hit. Or honestly, all 3 at a Lucky Hit, put them here. And then just seeing how that feels. And then once you get a good enough Winterglass and you don't need this anymore, then switching them back or something like that. And finally, for our key passive, we are grabbing Enlightenment, which we have talked about a ton throughout the video. And this is doing that really cool triple dipping with our elemental damage, where it's going to add the bonus for cold, lightning, and fire up before putting them in the additive bucket. So we can really go all in on non-physical to max this out. And because we have constantly alternating spells between Hydra Familiar, Hydra Lightning Spear, alternating elements, we are going to be constantly going back and forth, getting 15 stacks of this. So this is going to be proccing very fast, very often. We're going to have close to as much uptime as we can get on this with the amount of elements we're varying in our skill casts. And then finally, for our enchantments, we are going Frozen Orb and Ice Blades, and Frozen Orb doing all the good Winterglass stuff we've been talking about a lot, also delivering like 100% of our vulnerability, and it's big, constant, AoE, crushing AoE vulnerability and freeze, so really good for mobbing. Like our Lightning Spears are running around stunning everything, and then our follow-up Frozen Orbs are flying out, vulnerabling it all, and then slowly freezing it, quickly freezing it. And so we have really good vuln CC between those 2 things blasting. And then for our second one, we are running Ice Blades, which we also talked about. Basically, since we're not running Ice Blades in our bar and we're not casting Frozen Orb, the only way to get Ice Blades is from the enchantment. And because of the sheer volume of cooldowns we're pressing, especially with Familiar being a charge, we're just mashing these 5 cooldowns. We are getting a ton of value here. Like this 40 seconds is happening very, very often with the just like sheer volume of cooldowns we are pressing. So this is basically going to let us spool up to 6 Ice Blades, which are going to help feed the CDR from Winterglass to get as many Lightning Spears out as possible and get us to those 30 stacks I've been talking about, but also help reduce the cooldown on our Flame Shield and Teleport, which are not covered with Winterglass. So if you don't have any CDR and you're only relying on Winterglass, your defensives are going to be basically at normal cooldown, which feels pretty bad. So getting Ice Blades out is really going to help make your Teleport and Flame Shield feel a lot more useful because they're going to be up exactly when you need them. All right, heading over to Paragon to finally wrap it up here. All right, so they capped us at 5 boards now. I'm not going to get into how I feel about that because it's deep, and that's for another video maybe. But we're looking at this 5-board setup here, and basically what they did, it seems like, is they took power away from running more boards and they put it into the glyphs. So the glyphs are what you level now through little tooltip bug here, but the glyphs are what you level through the pit now instead of nightmare dungeons. You get like the abductite for masterworking through nightmare dungeons. They basically switched it where you used to upgrade glyphs through nightmare dungeons, and now you get abductite from nightmare dungeons and you upgrade your glyphs at the end of pit runs. And so we have maxed out glyphs here that we got from like the PTR auto level thing, and so our glyph power is good, but we're down like I guess we're missing like 80 something Paragon points. We're missing, there's 330, so we're missing 76 Paragon points. So still a lot of room to grow, and this is probably not going to be what the final board setup looks like. This is basically the best setup with the amount of points I have available. So with 76 more points, we're going to be extending out to some more legendary nodes in these 2 boards, and I might end up switching one of the boards depending on how that looks, and I might end up trying stuff like Enchantment Master, but I'm gonna have to mess with a couple of these other legendaries to see what's worth running. The 2 that are super worth running that we have already are Frigid Fate, which is the 60% multiplier we're gonna get very easily, and then Fundamental Release, which is the new multiplier, which we're also going to be able to stack up really easily because we're getting a ton of Vulnerable Burning and Critical Strike happening with this build. So all right, so from a strategy here, basically what we're trying to do is path through, activate 5 glyph sockets, and path through as much possible non-physical and damage reduction as we can. Because what we talked about with Enlightenment, all of our non-physical were triple dipping. So as big of non-physical boosts as we can get, that's really going to max out the value of Enlightenment, adding those together that we were talking about, right? So that's kind of the overall idea. And then from a glyph strategy, what you want to do now as compared to before is you only have 5 glyphs to run, right? And so we need the most power we can possibly get out of those 5 glyphs. And it's going to be more important now to sort of max the value around a glyph rather than just trying to like bring it online. And what I think is worth looking at right now is basically trying to find glyphs that deliver 3-fold value. You want to have additive damage in the bonus from the top. Then in the additional bonus, you want to have a multiplier. And in the legendary bonus, you want to have a multiplier. So you want to have damage getting added to the additive bucket at the top. Then you want to have 2 damage multipliers. And that makes like a golden glyph right now, especially when they're so juiced up like these ones are at level 100. So this is the new one they added called Eliminator. This is going to give us 624 bonus to all normal nodes within range. So you can see what I'm doing here, pathing up through this non-physical, and then just getting all the int and dex basically that I can get. I'm leaving out a little bit of dex, but I'm basically getting all the int I can get, and this is giving me 436 extra intelligence, like an insane amount of damage scaling just from the int. Then we're getting, you know, and if you were missing any attributes to like bring any of these other nodes online, which we're way over for all of them, but you know, you could grab the other attributes as well. But this Eliminator glyph is like super powerful in this first socket, I believe, and I think this is going to be kind of a staple for a lot of my builds here. But this is going to, you know, scale all those base attributes, and then we're going to get a 10% multiplier against elites, which includes bosses, and then we are also going to get another 30% multiplier under that. So really big value and boss damage and elite damage here. So then we are coming up into our Frigid Fate board positioned like this. We are scooping this damage reduction here, and then pathing up through this vulnerable, getting our glyph socket with Elementalist here, and the Elementalist is boosting this elemental favor. And so we're getting a nice 110% extra non-physical, which again, that equals 330% additive for us with Enlightenment active because we're triple dipping and it's non-physical, right? So we're pathing up from there, coming and grabbing this extra vulnerable and damage reduction here. We're obviously going and getting Frigid Fate real quick to bring it online. We're going to have that 60% covered very easily. Then we're coming up to Burning Instinct, and this board might change in the end, but for right now, it's a really good corner board, and I've always really liked this board as just like a corner board, but we're getting really high value from a really efficient dex path through here, and that's turning on destruction and giving us almost an extra 1000% critical strike damage. We're trying to max that out with all the decks around here. Then we're getting extra crit strike damage here. Then we're getting extra damage to burning. We're going to make a little detour to get this damage reduction and that little bit of extra armor we need for now that we talked about in the gear section. And with just slightly higher armor rolls on those pants, I wouldn't need these armor rolls here. So I'm grabbing those two and I'm grabbing these two right here. But they're basically like, you know, it's 4 points I'm using right now and they're getting me just over armor cap, so it's worth. But ideally, you'd want high enough rolls in your pants where you can pull those out and have those 4 points elsewhere. But we do need this damage reduction. We're getting like almost like 23% damage reduction from elites up here, which is really strong. And then we are coming into kindling. I'm kind of working my way up in this direction at the moment with my points that I'm getting. So this is like a little lower prio in that direction, but we're basically coming through, activating this dex path for destruction. And like we talked about, going back to Elementalist, we're looking for additive at the top with multiplier for the additional bonus and another multiplier for the legendary bonus. So we look at Elementalist, 110% non-physical additive, which doubles down from the enlightenment we were talking about. Then we get 15% additional bonus multiplier. Then we get 20%, almost 21% legendary bonus multiplier. So really good glyph here. And then coming up to destruction, same thing, where we have almost 1000% crit strike damage additive, and that scales exceptionally well with this build or any lightning spear build with splintering energy, because we're not only getting the crit damage value on all of our damage, but we're getting that to scale that aspect as well. And then we're getting additional bonus 12% multiplier, and then we're getting legendary bonus almost 30% multiplier. So really, really strong glyph in destruction now. Always has been a staple sorcerer glyph, but now destruction and exploit are really locked in as staples for sure. So pathing from here over to enchantment master board, and again this one might change, but we're mainly using it for the corner and the non-physical to get unleash online. And look at the value of a leveled up unleash here, man. We're getting an extra 150% additive to elites, an extra 100% non-physical, which is 300% with enlightenment, an extra almost 100 dex, and an extra almost 100 will. Then we're getting an 8% multiplier from the additional bonus, a little bit of extra mana regen, doesn't matter a ton, but then another 21% multiplier from the legendary bonus. But yeah, grabbing this non-physical, grabbing this damage to elites, coming to get more non-physical here, so we're kind of juicing our non-physical with the corner of this enchantment master board, and then coming down here to our final board, which is this new fundamental release board. And this board has like all the juice, so you basically want almost everything here. This is like the only one you might not want, and I'm really getting that. I don't actually need this. I can pull these points out now because we're good on this. But basically we're coming down pathing here to get exploit and for our final glyph, and then same thing here where we're getting 307.6, almost 308% vulnerable additive. We are getting a 10% multiplier on the additional bonus, and we're getting almost a 21% multiplier on the legendary bonus with very high uptime. So looking at our glyphs, all of them have that additive at the top maxed out as much as we can by providing value surrounding it. And then two multipliers, multiplier for additional bonus, multiplier for legendary bonus with high uptime. We want them like up you know, as much as we can. So there's not a ton of glyphs like this. Like I think the main other one is like torch and flame feeder, but they have some new conditional like burning stuff on the legendary bonus, I think. But these 5 glyphs I think are going to be really solid and may become sort of staples of the sorcerer Paragon lineup because of the sort of triple value we're talking about with the additive and then double multipliers. But yeah, anyways, coming down into the fundamental release, grabbing more non-physical, more damage reduction, more damage reduction, more damage to burning and elites, and then probably take these points out in the end. And this is the new legendary node fundamental release. Each time you apply vulnerable, burning, or critically strike an enemy, they take 10% multiplicative increased damage from you up to 30%. So we are applying vulnerable all the time from our bajillion frozen orbs. We are burning everything from our hydras and our familiars, and we are critically striking everything 100% of the time. So this has extremely high uptime with this build. And yeah, that's basically the Paragon board setup. Be sure to check the build planner. Like if you're planning to run this next season, I'm going to try to keep the build planner updated. So we'll have the final version of this with all the points figured out. Like they hadn't even updated like mobalytics yet. And so I couldn't even like build this outside of game in a planner if I wanted to. But as soon as that's working, I'm going to put a planner together and keep it updated for this build. So you can check back there for kind of what I think the final form of this board is going to be with the rest of the points I'm missing. But I hope this is kind of enough to get you started and you kind of understand the idea where if you were looking to take this and expand it out yourself, you kind of get what we're trying to do. And funnily enough, I think Enchantment Master could actually be really strong with this build because basically what that's going to do is 20% is going to turn Frozen Orb from 30 to 36%. And then it's going to turn Ice Blades from 40 to 32 seconds, I believe. 32 or 34. And so that's going to, let's see, 30%. So for 12 seconds less. So it should be 28, right? Because 40, so 10% of 40 is 4. And if it's a 30%, what does the note say? 20%. Sorry, 20%. So, yeah, it is 32. So it'd be 8. Yeah. Because 10% of 40 is 4. You just move the decimal over 1. And then, so 20%, which is double 10%, is 2 of those. So 8. So 40 minus 8, 32 seconds. Same thing with 4. We have a 30% chance if we're trying to increase that by 20%. We know 10% is 3 if we move the decimal over 1. So 20% is double that, and that's 6. So 36% is what our Frozen Orb would be with it. So anyways, I think that could be a nice little boosty boost to what we're trying to do here, but might not be necessary in like the final form with a boosted Winterglass. So anyways, more to play with in the Paragon, and we will be looking to, kind of re-embody this next season and kind of hone it in and take it to its final form at some point. So boom, that is going to be it for this one. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found it useful. Be sure to stay tuned for more cool Sorcerer builds. I think I'm also going to be playing Spiritborn. I've been doing a bunch of theory crafting with that before PTR started, and I only have like 16 build ideas or so after a couple days of thinking on it. But I think we're going to have some really cool ones there, and then I think we're going to have some really cool ones with Sorcerer coming up in Season 6. I'm trying to do as many of those right now during PTR as I can. We're only going to get through so many, and so I'm going to spend the last couple days of PTR really trying to cook, and then use that to try to maybe put out a few videos in the next few weeks leading up to Season 6 and the launch of Vessel of Hatred, where I will be playing a Spiritborn and a Sorcerer side by side, making build guides for both. So if you enjoy this kind of stuff, be sure to stick around, and with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to take care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.